My name is, as previously stated, Alanna Heiss. I'm awfully happy to be here. I have been to Brazil many, many times. I first came in 1985, I think. We were working on a big show at PS1 called Brazil Projects. And as with all fantastic shows, it's both famous and infamous. And I got to know a lot of the artists here in São Paulo and Rio and many other cities by working on that show. The logo you see up there, we're awfully proud of. It was designed by Lawrence Weiner. I think that many of you in the audience know who Lawrence Weiner is. He was just actually here in São Paulo a few days ago doing an exhibition. And we were super proud that we'd be able to show you this logo, which he designed for us, which is symbolizing for our activities, as you'll soon hear, in many spaces around New York City, but it's also used for our radio. And now that I'm on the subject, I'd like to do a commercial. The Clock Tower radio station is listened to by going on, our URL is clocktower.org. Clocktower.org. And if you get bored during my presentation, you can, if you have the facility to get into Wi-Fi, which I don't have here, you can just go and listen to the kind of music. We have a number of programs that are successful in South America, and one of them are some very good Brazilian DJs that we find we have a huge audience for when we look at our statistics. We're also at the Clock Tower doing many exhibitions, some very teeny-weeny and some very huge, and we'll talk a little bit about that more in Rio. With me coming for this trip, I'm very honored to say that two young curators, Beatrice Johnson, who also acts as the managing director of our operation, and Joe Ahern, who is a curator, as is Beatrice, but his specialty in our terms has a lot to do with music or music-related exhibitions that we do, which is a lot, a whole lot. And in terms of that, another commercial. If you want to be in touch with us, wave your hands so that people will know they can come up to either of you and ask any questions. You don't have to prepare them. And please know that you can email questions about what we're doing in New York to us if any one of our names. Mine is Alanna@clocktower.org. It has to be spelled correctly or it won't get to me, so you have to know me. So let's try, excuse me. I think we'll go to the first. Oh, there we are. We very much, this past year, were trying to decide whether we should add productions to the word clock tower. It seemed to me that was a good idea because it would imply to a large group of people that we actually worked. It also directs one a little bit away from the stifling and really, I think, old-fashioned word curator, which has been used entirely too much in the last 20 years. You know, curator of shoes in New York, you have curator. And most of what being a curator has to do with just producing things, being an organized individual, working with artists so that the work that they're doing can be seen and viewed and located and reviewed and so on. That's really more production. The topic I was asked to address was spaces. It's a topic very, very close to my heart. I love real estate. I'm addicted to real estate. Every newspaper in the world, I read the real estate section first, long before any art reviews, which are often a little bit discouraging to some of us. I think that I should make remarks about symposium. This one seems really well managed. The fact that I'm even here at this ungodly early hour would suggest that the organizers know something. There are two things that are pretty important with symposia. Well, one is size and one is duration. I'd like to speak for a moment about size. This seems like a very good sized auditorium. How many people do you think are here? Don't know. Okay. Big. 800. Okay, that's a lot, especially at this hour. It's 12. I mean, people should be just getting up right now. And I'm thinking of the first symposium that really was a challenging one for me. It was, I was invited with Walter Hopps and with John Coplands to go to Romania, to Bucharest, and for the Brancusi symposium. People were coming from all over the world. This is early 80s. I was thrilled. I mean, I don't know anything about Brancusi, but of course, I knew I could learn by the time of the symposium, and I thought about it a lot. Unbeknownst to naive me, the Americans had been chosen by the USIA, which is another code at that time in the United States for sort of CIA, and they were an organization that had common goals, USIA, CIA, and it was propaganda related. So, of course, they chose people that they thought would represent America very well in terms of our presentation of sculpture, which is why it was Brancusi. So we went to Romania. We were all very, very tired when we got there, and after one brief night's sleep, we're woken up in the morning by people banging on the doors of the hotel. The people were all in uniform. They were in American uniforms, not, Romanian uniforms. And sleepy speakers were pushed onto a truck, which was really a very lavish bus, and taken miles outside of Bucharest to a huge stadium. And I mean, we were very, very mesmerized by this, and of course not at all afraid. It was just took uniforms and guards to get us up. And so we went onto this much bigger stage. It looked over several thousand, 3,000, 4,000 people. Every seat was full. And this was 8:15 in the morning. It was, to a person from New York City working in the arts, just an inconceivable happening. And this happened for 2 days, like 6, 7, 8,000 people sitting there. And we talked amongst ourselves that the attitude of the Romanians towards Brancusi and sculpture in general must be an interest so high that it was comparable to great sports occasions and so on. And we were trying to figure that out and thinking, it's so wonderful to be in a country where they love sculpture so much. Then at a cocktail party at the end of the event, we mentioned this to artists we'd met, and they sort of gave those nervous smiles, And it turned out the artist said it was required that we go. And so the communists had a very different idea about attendance at symposium. They said, you're there, and you're there for 8:15 until the very end. Nobody's going to fool around. So that was the most highly attended symposium I've ever been to. And I think this is probably second, but I'm sure there was nobody making you come. The other event is duration, how long it lasts and how long the people who are involved in the symposium. And I then tell the duration story, which is there's a musician named Lee Scratch Perry. He's a Jamaican sort of reggae genius. He was one of the foundation musicians involved in everything we listen to now, even going on to rap music. Lee Scratch Perry, unfortunately, went mad. It didn't completely cripple his efforts in music. In fact, he became even more famous after he went mad. But he was quite mad, and one of the manifestations of his madness that Peter Paulo this morning could tell us about is that he changed his clothes a lot. He had a shower cap with holes in it and with a giant antennae coming out and a variety of hung jewelry around his neck. And he wore always a cape, a beautiful floor-length cape made out of small mirrors and many other things. But that was the main thing you saw, with all the mirrors, the antenna, the shower cap, and of course, big black glasses. So here's what happened in duration for Lee Scratch Perry's arrival. It was arranged by fans in England to get him into a big symposium where they were going to discuss issues of reggae, adopted ethnic music, and so on. And they had a lot of trouble getting him into the UK because he had a number of drug-related offenses which were recorded in numerous passports and so on. But they got it. They got him in, and he got right up to the immigration gate, and he was flanked on both sides by his entourage. He's standing there with the antenna, mirrored cape, dark glasses, and the UK immigration officer says, Mr. Perry, how long do you intend to stay in the UK? And he said, Could be one day, or it could be to the end of time. So, thanking our host, Regina, and the marvelous Monica, and Daniel Rangel, who brought our team here to match up with the Latitudes organizers. Now, just a minute, I'm getting the Latitudes person mixed up. There's the ICO people, that's Regina and the Daniel. And then the Latitudes people are, we'll come around and get them in the end. Okay. Thank you for inviting me. I will speak either for 15 minutes or until the end of time. The alternate space movement in the United States, of which I'm frequently characterized as being a mother, now unfortunately grandmother, took place because artists who were making very large-scale sculpture, generally, but sometimes painting, were anxious to develop their own viewing spaces. The work they were making was neither liked by museums, nor did it actually look even very good in museums. And so with those artists, I came, as did a couple of other people who were cast as organizers as opposed to artists, and we helped build a variety of spaces. In the case of me, the clock tower was one space that came out of this Brooklyn Bridge event, which turned out to be, again, very infamous and famous. See if we have, does this work? Yeah. Another very famous space was 112 Green Street. And the activity that you see in these slides is familiar to, I believe, every person in the audience. It's a production of art, which is very simple. The building that's being produced in is very sympathetic to production. The very nature of site-specific work is that it's usually made on site, yeah? And so the spaces you work in have to be not so formal that you can't work, which is one reason that although minimal art managed to sneak into the museum structure, most art after minimal art that was site indicative had hard times at museums. So I became the grandmother or the queen or whatever you want to say. I had at one point 5 or 6 existing spaces in all of New York City. In the 70s, New York was in a Great Depression, and one of the things the city had excess space. Things were closed down, windows were boarded up, blah, 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 blah. It was just great for artists because we had an enormous number of spaces to occupy, large and small. The clock tower came about because I was running exhibitions in a lot of street-level spaces. One was on the Bowery, one was out in Coney Island. But I got a little tired of having, it wasn't just being robbed. That was never an issue because no one ever wanted to take away the art I put in shows, also because it was usually too heavy to take away. It was a question of having people run through it with spray cans or destroy in some way the perfect exhibition center would be set up. So I decided I'd like to have also something not on the ground, not in a warehouse, and it was a tower. And I conceived of getting a tower that would be really personal to the artist who had the show and the viewer who was in the show. I assumed that there would be only one artist and one viewer because that was the usual audience for shows that I did, from maybe 1 to 50 people. And the clock tower was based on such a premise, and it is, until last January 2014, still had the image for New York that when you looked up and you heard the bell of the clock in all of Lower Manhattan, you'd think there's the clock tower. And it was a wonderful symbol of contemporary art in Lower Manhattan. Our mayor, Bloomberg, who was in many ways very, very good to artists, sold the clock tower to a developer. And so now there is still the clock tower. And you can also even occupy it if you wish. We understand that the residence, which will make up the tower, is going to be $36 million. That's how expensive that space is now in the eyes of the current New Yorker. Whereas since 1972, we had the clock tower as a free space, which we desperately, with the artists, raised money to put on shows for. So that meant, I'm skipping ahead of myself a little bit here. These are more shows showing, well, showing what you have to do to produce some shows. So, oh, marvelous. Thank you for putting this one in. This is an early show, the first one at the clock tower on the far left. The clock tower was this perfect cube with a big spiral staircase. And Joel Shapiro had the first show, and that's a bridge. And so you see the relationship between the teeny weeny wooden bridge and the very large space. I redid that show in May in a new space, which I think we'll be able to show you, I'm not sure. These were chosen to try to indicate how unimportant fixing up the rooms has always been to me. The doorways are shabby, and we weren't worried about that. What is important to me with space is that the architecture is not so aggressive that it removes the ability of the artist to shape the space. Now, that's a common fight amongst all of us who run museums or work in museums or put work in museums, which is what to do about the architect. The architect, in my view, is truly the enemy of contemporary art. And I think that there are occasions when we have been able to see an architect behaving nobly or with, I wouldn't call it love, they don't love artists, but with consideration, benign consideration. But those occasions don't happen very often. Mostly the architect is sitting scheming how they can remove any possibility for the artist to deal honestly with the space. And that is the great reason why all of my spaces, all hundreds of thousands of square feet, are usually old spaces because we're dealing with a Victorian warehouse plan as opposed to a new and dangerous, aggressive, creative architect, right? And also in the old spaces I deal with, the architects are dead. They're dead and they're not coming back, right? So, after Mayor Bloomberg surprised me by selling the clock tower, which I had actually been able to renegotiate a lease. This is sort of important to me, but it was only to me that it was important because it was a lease that could be broken if you sneeze, the mayor could sneeze, achoo, no more clock tower. But I had a lease until 2040 or something. I would have been beyond dead myself. And it was a great lease. You think, oh, beyond dead, I will still have the clock tower up in the sky, and so on. So we had to solve the problem of space very recently. So I'm now in a very new real estate mode, and I can surely tell you about our solution and what we did. We are a very tiny team now at the clock tower. I left PS1 4 years ago as director and decided that rather than go to be an emeritus curator at MoMA, which largely means you can get a seat in their fabulous restaurant and go to the shows anytime you want to, I decided it would be really much more interesting to me to go back to the old clock tower, which I knew I had until 2044 or something, and do activities there. And indeed it was, and I've been enjoying very much this activity, especially with all the young colleagues that I work with. If we had time to talk about what we're doing there, you would understand why I like it so very, very much. When I was still at MoMA, though, I got the experience of working in a huge and very, very great institution for 10 years. I did say in my contract that I wanted to open one more thing. And the one more thing was a radio station. And I bring it up because of all of the spaces that you are thinking about, and I was thinking about. I never dreamt I would have to use the radio, but I thought it would be a kind of toy, a wonderful toy. Radio has been a representative of the underground for so very, very long. In terms of radical political activity, especially in Latin and South America, the radio was always an essential tool for communicating with different bands of guerrillas who needed to to know where the other one was, and there were no roads up in the mountains where they were trying to get from one place to the other. In fact, in a peculiar result of the radio, I've become kind of in touch with a number of aging, if not elderly, radicals who see the radio as one of their primary achievements. And I've actually been to visit guerrillas who are running radio museums. They're all retired now, guerrillas, that in this particular ones that invite me. They're usually in some very benign relationship with the United States government, which allows them to ride horses and run radio stations. So it's a good life, the radio life. And in my case, we developed one of the very first art stations in 2003, which allowed us to concentrate on the sound of art. So the good thing about radio is it's radical by definition. Online, it's very, very, very easy to communicate to an entire world by just sitting in, not even getting dressed, getting out of your pajamas. You can actually work very easily. And it presaged a whole virtual world, which now we're seeing and developing in the last 5 years in terms of the art community around the world, which is having a lot of virtual galleries and virtual museums and virtual blah, 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 blah. Anyway, you know. So one third thing that online radio did, which was very odd for me, is that I'd always spoken against collections of art. In my world, collecting art quickly tips the organizer, the producer, the museum director, over the line into being too interested in the object, in the retail object. So you start thinking, oh, I mean, that's a very wonderful artist. She's been doing such great work. However, that beautiful painting over there would look so damn good, and we could use it like 1,000 times. So you start getting more concerned with retail and not very concerned with the origin of the production. And I thought that it was very dangerous. And so for me, and anyone working with contemporary art, it's a problematic issue to be also at the same time managing a collection. So I stayed away from collections. It was like, bad. Collections, bad. Art, good. But with online radio, it turned out that it is best as collections. And so our archives of interviews and music and sound and incredible things that can be shared by everyone outside the elitist art community that we all occupy can be shared with everybody, and it stays there. It's alive, it lives, it's a collection. And if you go on the previously advertised Clock Tower UR, clocktower.org, you'll be able to tune into the archives and go back, and you can hear, because we got some of these from the Museum of Modern Art, they had recorded lots of people, like Duchamp. You can hear Duchamp's strange, high, whiny voice. I don't know what I wanted to do most. I wanted to put in a new bathroom. That's what he actually is talking about in the radio interview. And we are also able to capture the archives of a man named Charles Ruas, and historical radio being directed by David Weinstein at our place, has interviews of such bizarre nature with anybody from Burroughs to just you name it. Just go on and you'll find it. So the radio station started before I left MoMA. It was 2003, but now the radio becomes a way in which all the spaces that we're working with can be, in fact, some strange way united. So here's an extremely odd picture of PS1, which continues to live in the PowerPoint that I occupy. It's what it is. It's PS1 from the back. And now it says MoMA PS1 on the back there. Now, when we merged with MoMA, as founding director, I made the word say MoMA PS1. But after I left, Klaus Biesenbeck, my good friend and protege and darling, lovable Klaus, he changed the entire wall to say MoMA PS1. Can you imagine? So that just shows in those simple graphic images what direction he was going more towards the very beautiful space, although he knows everything about bad spaces because he and I share that joy. He decided that PS1 might go more towards the moment side. And see if we have another picture. Oh, these are just fabulous old-time pictures. That's a Richard Serra drawing up there in the attic of PS1. It's I-beams dug into the floor. Good heavens. This is one of our new partners. In order to do our productions in New York, we had no space at the Clock Tower, and we will have a long-term space in 2 years, but we didn't have one right now. So we went out and we found 5 partners. Oh, okay, almost over. And the 5 partners are Pioneer Works, which you're seeing here, which is these are all new spaces run by young people, and I have found that it's exciting to be in young people's spaces and also not to have the power of running it. When I was running PS1, everyone was really nice to me all the time because I had more space than anyone in the United States. But now I have no space, so I'm like really nice to my partners. And here is Pioneer Works in Red Hook, Brooklyn, a beautiful, beautiful space. This is one of our most exciting partners. It's called Knockdown Center, and it's just beautiful. It's 50,000 square feet, and as you can see, there are a lot of windows. But other than that, the architect who's of course dead architect, is not interfering. That's the Joel Shapiro show that I told you we redid for the first time. In this big space, it's a little tiny Joel Shapiro, and a big Richard Nonis. Here's Times Square. We've been working in Times Square the last year and a half, doing lots and lots of events, most of them only for one night. Many of them are performance related, which also we have completely covered by our radio stations, which have huge listeners all over. But the Times Square in New York is turned from the bad old Times Square to the horribly boring, Disney family Times Square. And we're doing our very best to bring artists back into Times Square and to decadent activities. And this is our new, as you would say, clock tower, our vision in the sky. It's 6,000 square feet on the 22nd floor of a beautiful office building, a kind of space I've never worked with before, but which I'm enjoying very much. So, the last thing we summarize about real estate. Important things about real estate that are good things. It's good if it's big. You can include more people, more artists. It's good if it's cheap. It's good if you have a location that a lot of people can get to, the artists can get to, and that the location itself can serve as a geographical organizer for other events. Things that are bad. I regard space that has aggressive architecture as simply not space I want to work with. I'd rather spend my time with the artist. Otherwise, I'd work for some, be a PR person for an architectural firm. It's very good if it is not expensive to maintain. If it's expensive to maintain and you find yourself working to keep up a temple, a church, a cathedral, it should be the cheaper it is, the more time you spend and money on art. And thirdly, location for contemporary art space can be not in the seat of power. It doesn't have to be downtown. It doesn't have to be so convenient. We're not dealing with shopping. If you're in the middle of a shopping center, you have to ask yourself what you're doing there. And it could be for good reasons, or it could be for bad reasons. So in the rules of real estate, there are many more, and I'd be delighted to discuss with them anytime. And thank you for having me.